So the topic of my talk is swimming against the waste stream, and I wanted to look at some of the innovations that are happening now to keep us from drowning in all of the crap that we're buying and using and throwing away. A good place to start is to think about waste, which is actually a very subjective term in the same way that weed is a very, very subjective term. And as we live farther away from where things are produced and where things end up, we've come to classify them in all kinds of ways. And for consumer waste, most of this stuff is MSW. You can see in the EU how it's breaking down right now. This is what ends up in landfills, in waterways, and in incinerators. One of the problems with MSW is that so much of this stuff is made up of so many different types of components that it's really not cost or energy efficient to separate it. And that's one of the reasons why the landfills are filling up so much. The EU has a lot of, very varied approaches to this very complex problem. Interestingly, reduction from the beginning is not one of them. So I just wanted to put in a plug for reduction. The first thing I looked at were bioplastics. These are being used now for all kinds of consumer goods, upholstery, electronics casings, food industry stuff, and as also packaging. A lot of people maybe have heard of these as corn-based plastics, but in fact they're being produced from a whole array of crops. And production of bioplastics is now going up 25 to 30% annually. So it's a really big industry. And you can see the companies that are profiting from it are a lot of the same companies who own the seeds for the crops that are being used for biofuels as well. So the pros and cons are very similar as what's happening in the biofuels discussion. The next thing I looked at was aluminum, because it's so energy intensive to produce aluminum for consumer use. There isn't really much innovation going on here except in these oriented polypyrene packaging things. Mostly people are looking at ways to use aluminum instead of other metals, which are much more difficult and expensive to recycle. About 95% of aluminum can be very easily recycled. The next thing I looked at was packaging materials. And by volume, this is the biggest component is plastic. By weight, it's paper. Part of the plastic volume is because of all the styrofoam, right? Everything you buy electronic is packed in styrofoam. There are some people in New York who have figured out a way to make packaging material and building insulation out of mushroom fibers, which I thought was a very interesting innovation. Styrophobia in Hawaii is making plates and styrofoam packing out of sugar cane, and also pouring some PLA materials as well out in Hawaii. But what I really found is that there's lots and lots of individual innovation stuff going on, kind of scale of economy. People are inventing things that are useful for their communities, their clients, and their particular product. The next thing in construction, straw bale construction is not actually very new, but maybe there isn't much of it in Eastern Europe. And the great thing about this is if you tear the building down, everything can be turned back into the environment, right? It's wood and straw. People are building beautiful structures, and there are also some other advantages to straw bale building construction as well. The last thing that I looked at was coltan, because this has become such a charged issue. The bad news is there's no alternative. People in the metals industry don't seem to care. The good news is that consumers are pressuring companies, and so there is money going into R&D in this now. So I think when we look now at principles for our ideal zero waste, there's really no way in this century that we can do that without making sure that we don't treat humans as waste as well in dealing with our garbage problem. And I just want to end by saying that, every problem is also an opportunity, and there really is a lot of creative energy going into this now. And it's a big problem, but we're also finding solutions. I just want to thank Leah Kablo from Hummus, who helped me out with this, and Steve also on the technical slide management end.